This is the Westminster Standard Podcast. I'm Ryan Biese. Welcome. Today I'm joined by ruling elder, President Dr. Paul McNulty of Grove City College and a fellow Grove City alumnus, Sean Morris. Welcome, brothers. Thanks for sharing your time today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with both of you.
Glad to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having us.
Well, Dr. McNulty, this is your first time on the podcast, so would you give us a brief introduction, your family background, how you came to the Reformed faith?
Sure. Thank you again. Well, I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, in a working class neighborhood, and I was a Roman Catholic kid, very devout Catholic family.
With a name like McNulty, I'm surprised.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And yes, I was raised in sort of a strict environment in a positive way. My parents took the faith very seriously and made sure that I followed all the rules. So by the time I got to high school, I was aware of sort of the Bible story very well. I didn't have any doubts. I don't remember ever thinking that any of what we learned about Jesus wasn't true. And so I had an older sister who had come to faith and basically said, Paul, if you want this to be real and change your life, you're going to have a relationship with Christ. And I remember going into the summer, going into 10th grade, sitting in my backyard and just repeating over and over again, I trust you, Christ. I have faith in you. Save me. I want to be your follower. I'm trying to think of every way I could say it just to make sure he had heard me. And by the time I came back to high school, sophomore year, I felt like I was wearing a new jersey. I'd see a kid. These were the 70s, by the way. So people wore big crosses around their necks and demonstrated their faith in more overt ways. And every time I saw a kid in my big high school with a cross, I'd kind of give them a wave and say, I'm on your team now. I'm one of you. But for the rest of my high school life, it was pretty much just young life and still with my family in church and not really reading my Bible in any serious way and just kind of poking along. And I was a runner, a distance runner. And so I got recruited by Grove City to come and run cross country and track. And if it wasn't for Coach John Barr, who was the cross country coach, sending me some letters in the fall of 1975, I wouldn't have ended up at Grove City. And I came there completely unaware of what it was all about as far as Christian school and Reformed faith and all that. But I took what was called religious and philosophical dimensions of life. It was one of our core courses when I was now we call it a biblical revelation, but I was required to take this. And I had Dr. Andrew Hoffecker, who went on to teach from Grove City to Reformed Theological Seminary, was there when you guys were, I think, at Jackson. And he changed my life. And within 3 weeks, within 3-4 weeks, I could not get enough Christian worldview. It just all came together for me. It was God's grace poured out in a most extraordinary way. And my thoughts were transformed. And for the next 4 years, it was the most exciting thing that I was involved in, is just learning what it meant to have a Christian worldview and to think Christianly about life and to wonder what that meant for my future. But that was the key moment, the sort of coming to Grove City and getting plugged in right away to some extraordinary people who made the Reformed faith attractive and exciting and thoughtful. And in those days, we had Francis Schaeffer and we had J.I. Packer and we had R.C. Sproul, and it was just an exciting time for Reformed thinking, and I was all about it.
Mm. And you've been involved in church planning for much of your time as part of the Reformed faith.
Yeah, I wasn't a Presbyterian at that point. I didn't have any kind of denominational home. I had left my family, religion, and I was now kind of in search of where I'd go. Now, I met my wife, Brenda, in my junior year, and she had been raised in a PUSA environment, a liberal environment. She was a on-fire Christian, but if she had any sort of default in her church selection, it would be to look at the Presbyterian church. So when we went to law school, we found a wonderfully faithful Orthodox PCUSA church in Columbus, Ohio, and it was enough to get us kind of oriented towards being Presbyterians. And then we came to Northern Virginia. I got a job on Capitol Hill right out of law school, and we moved to Washington, D.C. area, and we visited McLean Presbyterian Church as our first church visit. And the long story short, there I got to know Steve Smallman, the pastor, very well. And before you knew it, we were all plugged in at McLean Pres. Now I learned what the PCA was. I couldn't have told you about the PCA prior to that. And in 1986, so that was 83. In 86, I was elected to the session. And from 86 until I came to Grove City to be president, which was 2014, so 28 years, I served as a PCA elder without any break. I, I unfortunately got tied up with David Coffin and planted a church in Fairfax in 1990, and he didn't believe in sabbaticals from being a ruling elder, which
That sounds right. Yeah.
so I was sort of stuck with the job, and but to be fair and honest about it, was a blessing. And planning a church is hard business, but all through my time as U.S. Attorney, Deputy Attorney General, of some really intense work responsibilities, I was blessed by having a foundation in the church, week after week. And I even moderated the presbytery in 1990s in the middle of some crazy thing I was doing on Capitol Hill. So it was exciting times.
Wow. And so now this is your 10th year as president of Grove City, is that right?
11th.
You're in the
Yeah.
11th. I get that math wrong.
That's all right. When you're a college president, you want credit for every year because it's a survival process. So I want to take full credit for 11.
That's right. And so is this kind of a dream job? When I was a student, I thought, man, being president of Grove City College would be just the best thing ever. I thought. So
Yeah.
is
No,
it
you were
the best
right.
thing ever? Okay.
You were right. No, it's a wonderful combination of things. Every given day I get to be organizing. I like to organize things. I like to initiate things. You can try new things all the time in every component of campus life. There's the pastoring role. My favorite part of the job is connecting with students and just whether it's a Bible study in the home or it's lunch. Like today, I'll have lunch with a couple McLean Presbyterian Church students who are here. But just the pastoral, relational aspect, and then the life of the mind. I am blessed to have such great folks around here and guest speakers, and I pinch myself all the time with the sort of value of that in our lives. So you're absolutely right, Ryan. There is a lot to love about the job. It is a job that comes with a lot of strain and long hours. We live on campus. It's a 24/7 job. The average president today is about 5.5 years in tenure. So it's not a job that's easy. And we've been through COVID, and there are just a lot of aspects to it. So sustaining the energies is definitely an issue, but it's a joy day in and day out.
I'm sure. And so Grove City was founded in connection with the mainline Presbyterian Church in the North when it was Orthodox.
Mhm.
And how has that relationship changed over the years? I think during your tenure, there was a somewhat significant change that you initiated. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is a very Presbyterian part of the country,
Mhm.
this piece of Western Pennsylvania, and especially north of Pittsburgh, when you get out of the the steel mill world and you get into the more agricultural area. This was an area settled by Scotch Presbyterians, and so there's a Presbyterian church, usually 3 or 4 on every corner.
Yeah.
So, so Grove City was part of that Presbyterian vibe from the beginning. Isaac Kettler, the founder of the school, was became ordained as a Presbyterian teaching elder after he became president. So in his 20s, he pursued his education and added that to his impressive resume. And so right from the beginning, we had a Presbyterian elder president. But the college was therefore loosely aligned, never owned by or controlled by the PCUSA, but aligned with the Presbyterian world here. And so then by the time you get to the 1960s and you start to see the drift to the left, you see the problem emerge, which is that if the school is going to remain aligned, it's going to have to be more intentional about what its reformed evangelical character is going to be. And to J. Howard Pugh, our great benefactor's wonderful credit, he saw that and he brought in Charles McKenzie in 1971 to be the president. And he served for 20 years. And McKenzie's mission was to, in a sense, bring the college back to its more traditional, orthodox, reformed position on things, and to bring faculty in who would be aligned better with that. And so he hired John Van Til and John Sparks and Andy Hofecker and Jim Dixon and Jim Biese. And these were the hires in the 1970s. I showed up, by the way, in the fall of 76 and was the beneficiary of these new and impressive professors who, as I mentioned earlier, shaped my soul greatly. And so Mackenzie did great work, not to mention the fact that he had to fight the United States government on what it meant to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left in the early 90s, which, by the way, he went to RTS Orlando and had a great run there, he had put the school on a new trajectory. And when I was contemplating the opportunity to take this job, that was what was on my mind first and foremost, is how do we pick up on the Mackenzie legacy and just strengthen, reaffirm Grove City College as thoroughly, authentically, genuinely Christian college from in every sense, in every area of what it does, and to be focused on biblical truth in the way we go about our business. And by God's wonderful grace, there's just been a tremendous response and support for that. And that's really kind of where we are today.
Sean, I don't know if you remember during your time there, but I remember hearing the stories about President McKenzie, and especially those early days, and there was a lot of pushback to that emphasis. I remember one faculty member talking about how they would deflate the tire. The students would deflate the tires in our cars because he had really, it was kind of a party school. I think the school was on the verge of losing accreditation, and then McKenzie gets there and just cleans house to return to that foundation. And I think the house was in better order when you arrived. But Sean, do you remember any of those stories?
Right.
I do. I mean, I heard stories without getting into overly detail. I heard stories of the president intervening in some of the social lives of staff and faculty members in ways that perhaps they were behaving less than biblically, and he turned that around. I heard stories about certain housing groups or fraternities where it used to be that you'd walk into such a housing group and you'd lose track of how many beer bottles you might find on the floor. And then by the time we were there, you lost track of how many study Bibles you would find on the floor. The Lord had done such a wonderful work of revival and turning the culture around in such a godly way in 30 years. I heard stories of Charles McKenzie, Jim Biese. I got to know him well and heard a lot of those stories. I had Andy Hofecker, Dr. Hofecker, for one class my first semester at RTS Jackson. So we connected in Mississippi. And of course, while I was at Grove City, we were using that textbook, Building a Christian Worldview, which I think was edited by Hofecker and Gary Scott Smith. And that was still is a tremendous resource. We're using that same volume right now, by the way, sir, for our children's homeschool education. So it continues to pay dividends.
That's fantastic. Well, you put your finger on, by the way, an important point, which is McKenzie was working on two tracks. On the one hand, he was dealing with the sort of what it meant to be a Christian college, but he was also dealing with the cultural craziness at the time. And that was the school I was at. And you described it right in terms of the parties and everything else. So he was trying to bring it back in that sense, just the way those 60s and the 70s had changed culturally. And so he accomplished two great things. And a lot of that pushback he got was, in fact, more on the cultural side,
Mm.
just to kind of, he shut down, for example, off-campus housing
Mm.
2 years after I graduated, because that was the place where the parties were occurring. And so that was not well received by the fraternities who had anticipated that continuing. So I'm very thankful, and my predecessors, more immediate predecessors, are very thankful that we took over jobs where the college was much saner and safer, and
Yes.
we did not have to worry about that.
Yeah. Well, the Grove City College Bulletin describes the goal of the college to provide an excellent education in a college which seeks to be thoroughly Christian and evangelical in character. I always loved reading that. When I was a student, someone may have described me as being in the cage stage of Reformed convictions at that point. But how is this priority manifested in the college's academic curriculum in ways that would appeal to PCA parents?
Well, I think that first and foremost, when we think about a reform perspective, we start with God's grace. We
Mm.
recognize that we are sinners, and that we are incapable, apart from grace, to understand His truth. And if that is embedded in the culture of an organization, then I think there's a humility and there's a determination to approach God's word with a, um, a dependence on His grace to help us understand. And that's actually one of the real secrets to Grove City College being distinctive, is this intellectual humility, which is, not what you find in higher education today. It's just the opposite. And so, by having a focus on God's grace, there's also a focus on biblical truth and sort of biblical theology, and that sort of permeates campus life, is studying the Word. And so I'd say that faculty know when they're hired here that we're going to be oriented by a biblical understanding of truth in every area to the fullest extent possible. And obviously, the scriptures don't speak to a vast majority of things that are taken up in the classroom, but
Mhm.
that biblical worldview and those biblical principles and that sense of searching for God's truth as He's revealed it in the world and in the Word, that does um, uh, describe what we're doing, and it's expected that the faculty will embrace that. And we are non-denominational, and we have faculty from a wide variety of Christian backgrounds. We have a significant Catholic population, in large measure because families in this country are looking for trustworthy schools,
Mhm.
schools that will be faithful to uh, truth and will um, do what they say they do, not just platitudes, but their realities of what's happening, and that the environment embraces traditional values, which is what we do. So I think it's really describes, when we think about that description that you mentioned, Ryan, it really describes the culture of the institution and the way in which we educate students um, by looking to the sovereignty of God in our lives, and how that will, um, by coming before Him in submission to that, it will guide us and give us confidence to act in faithfulness.
Hmm. Well said. And so that spiritual character is not just reflected in the classrooms, but Grove City is, that phrase that we heard so often, Sean, in loco parentis.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think there's a very important emphasis, at least when I was there, that the college is not in loco ecclesia.
Yeah.
That there's a strong emphasis in sending students into the local churches. Would you talk about the relationship the college and the college community has with the church communities in Grove City and Western PA?
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts of being president is Sunday mornings. As Brendan and I are driving to our PCA church, and both of you attended Hillcrest,
That's
which
right.
is about 7-8 miles away. As we were driving through the town of Grove City, we watched the kids walking to the churches that are in Grove City, and it's just a beautiful sight because the numbers are so large. So I think a few things about that. Number one, it's just sort of the culture of the campus that you go to church, and In fact, where in America would you have a student roll out of bed to go get brunch and dress up for brunch so that his or her friends don't think that they blew off church? You know,
Yes.
that,
Yes.
but we have that as kind of in the culture. Secondly, we actually structurally, we have a good Sunday policy. We don't we don't play on Sundays. We don't compete on Sundays. We're not open on Sundays. And so we haven't made it difficult for students to go to church. Expect that we're just going to do things as normal on that day. And then thirdly, I really think this is significant. The faculty go to church, and the faculty are role models for our students. One of our most vibrant churches these days is actually an Anglican church, Grace Anglican, which was started, I think, by around the time you guys were at Grove City, just before maybe you, or at the time you started there, about 06, 07. It's drawing 600 people to its worship service. But part of that is that there are a lot of faculty go there, and the students are impressed with that. The Orthodox Presbyterian Church in town also has a lot of faculty that are attending. And so I think faculty are great role models for our students by showing their involvement in the church. I was just visiting the OP Church last Sunday, and it was Lord's Supper. And all four of the elders serving the Lord's Supper were faculty of the college. I think that's a wonderful witness to young people to know that, yeah, I've got to build that into my routine. And so we embrace the idea of a local church, and want our students to see that as a critical part of what they should do. In fact, we don't do Sunday evening vespers anymore, which I got a little bit of pushback on that. But in part, it's because I didn't want Sunday evening vespers to sort of be seen as a substitute for the local church. And that wasn't the only reason. Students weren't actually coming as much because I think, as a good sign, they were going to church in the morning, and it just didn't, fit into their plans the same way it used to.
I remember you spoke of the faculty who are elders. Mark Graham in the history department. That was a conversation with him in his office. That was where I was a Lutheran when I came to college, so we didn't have any concept of the fourth commandment. It was the third commandment anyway. But that was where I was convinced of the Lord's Day as the Christian Sabbath. And I don't think that was related to the history curriculum, but it was just how these faculty are in the lives and ministering to the students. Sean, you actually majored in Christian thought. You want to share any of how those faculty influenced you?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. And I think the degree program, the name has been changed now, but I think my degree reflects the old title. But yeah, Dr. McNulty, I came in as a PCUSA individual, and but I was already well aware of how that denomination was trending and how that did not align with my convictions. And I was already planning on seminary and the ministry post undergrad. And so by the time I got to Grove City and taking classes in the biblical studies department, folks like Dr. Biese, folks like Dr. Kemeny, Dr. Moeller, Ian Duguid was on the faculty at that time, T. David Gordon, all these folks. I mean, it was hook, line, and sinker. I embraced Reformed convictions. I was mentored by these folks tremendously. It shaped my life. Grove City, I cannot say how much the Lord used my time at Grove City to shape me as a young man. I met my wife there. I got married in that chapel. I came into the PCA. I came into Reformed convictions. I matured so greatly during those years. It was wonderful. Just a couple side notes. Ryan, your listeners who are not necessarily viewers won't see it, but there's some wonderful sartorial details here. You've got your Grove City College necktie. Dr. McNulty has his Grove City College shield lapel pin, and I've got my Grove City College cufflinks on here for the occasion. So I appreciate those little details.
Yeah,
that's right. And then the other thing was just you mentioned about Sunday brunch, and that reminded me of two funny anecdotes. One was back when we were there. at the time, Grace Anglican Church only had evening worship services, and so the
Okay.
students who were going there,
It's still true, by the way. Yeah.
still, yeah. So they would. I remember the culture was that, my friends who were going there were thinking, well, we're going to worship tonight, but we haven't gone yet. If we roll into brunch, Sunday brunch in the dining hall with plain clothes, people will think that we're terrible heathens and we've skipped out on worship. So they would dress in church clothes to go to brunch to let people know they are still worshiping Christians and it's the Lord's Day. But we don't want you all to think that we're slacking off and we attended
Right.
Bedside Baptist with Reverend Sheets this morning. No, no. That was the joke. So we dress for brunch. We'll still go to worship later, but we don't want people to think ill of us. And
That's
I,
great.
I remember
That's
coming into
hilarious.
class Monday morning with Paul Kemeny, now Dean Kemeny, and he was jokingly griping. He said, "I was late to church yesterday. I was 15 minutes late because of traffic. Where in the world, besides Grove City, Pennsylvania, is there traffic backed up on a Sunday morning where you can't get to where you're trying to go because there's a traffic jam? This is surely some kind of cultural capital that we have here in this part of the world that doesn't exist elsewhere."
Yeah, it's very special. And you mentioned the all-star lineup of that faculty, and that's been the case for a long time. And one of my priorities as president has been to make sure that as we have changes in that department, we continue to find the very best to sustain that. That's why we went out and got Carl Truman, and we've had two, by the way, at least new PCA faculty members. Sogi Biyun, Dr. Biyun is the chair of the department, and he's just extremely popular on campus and a wonderful guy. And he's actually a PCA elder down at City Reformed in Pittsburgh. He drives an hour down to Pittsburgh for that. And then Josiah Hall is a relatively New Testament guy. He teaches, for example, the Gospel of John, which I've heard fantastic things about. Another PCA faculty member. So we have been blessed to be able to find really strong faculty to continue. My view, and I know I'm biased, but I actually think this is defendable, is that we have the strongest Orthodox undergraduate program in the country. So if you're thinking about where you want to study religion in the undergraduate, not seminary level, that you would have a hard time finding anything stronger than what Grove City's program is. And we now have a master's program in Christian ministry, so you can attend Grove City, and in 4 years, you can graduate with both the undergraduate BA and a master's in, and then that really serves as a foundation if you want to go into seminary and do, more theological training. So it's been wonderful to see that. And lastly, I'd say this, that if you look at our graduates and where they're going to church, we have a lot of Grovers. I mean, tons who are, getting plugged into PCA churches around the country. I was thinking about the list of those churches, and especially in the big city areas like Nashville and McLean and the Washington D.C. area, and Christ Covenant in Charlotte, and of course Redeemer in New York City, and the list goes on. These are churches that have drawn a lot of our Grove City grads. City Reformed in Pittsburgh is, when I go there to visit, I probably talk to, a couple dozen Grove City grads who were attending that church. So there seems to be a draw to the PCA among our alums as well.
And that's good. So, can you comment as not just the president, but also the father of alumni? What should parents consider about Grove City as far as, not just the spiritual, but the academic training that they're going to get there for their children, for the, what was it that Dr. Thrasher always says, those transferable skills.
That's right. Yeah. Well, one of the hallmarks of our program is our humanities core. And Sean alluded earlier to his homeschooling curricula. And I think that's where a lot of families are particularly interested in seeing what kind of focus does the school have on Western civilization and the humanities. And so we have a very strong humanities core that is required for all of our students. So our 2,000 plus students, whether you're an electrical engineer or computer programming or an accountant, you're going to take 18 hours of humanities. And that's going to include Western civilization. Now we've expanded our biblical revelation to a Bible and theology 2-course sequence, so 6 hours. Christianity and civilization, which is a worldview course, Christianity and civilization and literature, I should say, and civilization and the arts. These are courses that are rich and prepare a person for, not just the good living, but the good life.
Mm.
And so parents should know that a Grove City student is broadly educated and prepared for all of the changing circumstances that God may bring to pass in their lives. But at the core, we've already talked about it, of course, is the spiritual fidelity and the faithfulness, the firm hold on orthodoxy. So they can count on that. They can count on all. As you mentioned, I was a parent of Grovers. I know about the amount of worship, the amount of Bible study, the amount of mission opportunities. Both my daughters were on what's called ICO, Inner City Outreach, and they did that all 4 years. So they had wonderful opportunities to um, live out the values and the faith commitments that they grew up with, because both of them are daughters of the church and experienced that in their lives. And so, yeah, parents can have high confidence that that we say what we do what we say. That there's an integrity there that's very
Mm.
important, and that they'll be a part of a community. I mean, we joke about marrying me and your spouse at Grove City. I married my wife almost 44 years ago in the chapel, but that's just a sort of a component of the rich community of the campus that fosters relationship building of all sorts, um, and it's very special. So we're seeing real positive response from families around the country. Our applications are up 20-year high,
Hmm.
and so we're encouraged that in this tough time culturally, families are finding Grove City College. More than half of our students are coming from outside Pennsylvania. And by the way, more than half of our students this year in the freshman class, first time ever, are from non-public school combination. So
Hmm.
homeschool, classical Christian school,
Mhm.
more than 50% are from those the K through 12 environments, which just again speaks to, I think, in some ways, the post-COVID awareness that families have about education and what they're really looking for.
Mm. Wow. Yes. Well, as we want to kind of shift gears, this is your the last year of your presidency, and obviously all the faculty at Grove City are at the top of their fields. But some faculty have helped to shape the trajectory of the college more than others. Who have been some of the most significant hires that you've made as president? I know you've got a vice president of the United States who works for you now, and so who are some of
Yeah, we just have we've been trying to do a vice president initiative. We just got one. We're not sure how many more.
Yeah.
Dan, I may talk to Dan Quayle at some point, but um, uh, uh, now, right, this is the question that gets me in trouble, right? This is the one where I'm going to start picking out
which
names.
is your favorite child is the next one. Just
Right.
be
Right,
ready
yeah.
for that one.
This is a dangerous question. I know I can, of course, say Carl Truman without any hesitation, because the rest of the faculty would say yes, of course, Carl Truman. He would have said that one. But no, Carl has been wonderful. It was a great joy to recruit him, and just a providential moment. And
Mm.
he has, um, I think, what people would be so delighted to see is how engaged he is with students, and having he and Katrina have them in their home all the time.
Mm.
And he's all in when it comes to being an undergraduate professor, in addition to his incredibly busy writing schedule. So there was a strong faculty here when I came, and we've just looked to fill positions with people who are fully aligned with our mission. I've been really thankful for, as I mentioned, we call it the now BATS, though they don't want to be called that, but it's Biblical and Theological Studies. It was
Ah.
BARS, Biblical and Religious Studies. But been thankful for the hires there. I mentioned Solgi Bune as the chair, tremendous pickup. He came from Oak Hill in London, and he's now reached out and brought two other faculty from there. So we've been beneficiaries of his work. We've seen a transformation in our English department, for example. Josh Mayo is now the chair, and Kristen Waha and Jeff Bilbro, who's a writer. So I'm really excited about how the English department is very popular among students, because these are conservative people who love great ideas and great
Yeah.
books and in great conversations in literature. So they're not afraid. They're not afraid of what students might want to read, but they're able to guide students in
Mhm.
the appropriate way to look at literature. And
So
that's
the
just
text actually means something. It's not just what
exactly.
you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Right, exactly. So that's a just one department. Our business school has been transformed into a business school in a full sense of that. And Michelle McFeeters is the dean there, and she is a strong Christian woman who really has set a great standard for that whole new school. And the list goes on and on of the kinds of great folks who have been drawn here, realizing that Grove City doesn't have tenure, that we're not, the kind of school that is sort of um, governed in the same way, but they just know they want to be in a place that is sane and trustworthy, and where they can be authentic about their faith, and that's why it's been relatively easy to fill our positions.
Mm. And there've been a number of building programs over the last 11 years. You've got
Yeah.
Rockwell Hall's been remodeled, Rathburn Hall has been built. You have
Yes.
a new a science, technology, engineering, mathematics building, a new food service company, and a Chick-fil-A.
Woohoo!
There you go. Yeah,
What
that
what have
was
I missed there?
crowning achievement. Chick-fil-A was the crowning achievement.
Yes.
You'll want to remember for that. Yeah, no, the Rockwell is an amazing story because that's $48 million renovation. And that's more expensive than any building we've ever built before. And it's now been tied in physically with this STEM building, which was a relatively new building. And so this opens for use in the fall. And I've been through, of course, many, many times as the construction's been going on. It's going to be beautiful. And it's going to be the strongest, um, you know, small college STEM facility in the region and beyond. It's going to really be extraordinary. The science building was dedicated on the same day as the chapel in 1931
Hmm.
for purposely, because J. Howard Pugh wanted to make the point that there was no tension between faith and science.
Hmm.
So they had the dedication of one building in the morning and dedication of the other in the afternoon. And since that time, the building hasn't had much attention, and so this is a gutted out and rebuild it completely effort. Also, the library was completely gutted and rebuilt. And
How could I forget the library?
yeah, I went to the library, and I took a little heat for that too, because Grovers are traditional people, and they like
Right.
these old oak tables and
Yeah.
no air conditioning, so you could sweat and learn. But I wanted it to be a place that drew students and really was kind of a center.
Mhm.
And the coffee shop in the library is extremely popular, and it's busting with activity now.
Mhm.
And so we just want to again create more positive student experiences. Another big part of our effort in the past decade has been on athletics. Don't get me started because you don't have another hour, because I have to get somewhere work in the that went a team that went from 0-10 to 10-0 in football, and how we've now the last 2 years ranked the top 20 in the nation in football. But we started a number of new varsity sports. We have now men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse. Men's lacrosse has won the PAC championship the last 5 years. They'll almost certainly win it again. Last year, we won the all men's and all women's sports trophies for our conference, first school to do that in 18 years. And we probably going to do it again this year. So we've hired fantastic coaches. And when we're talking about hires and faculty, I mean, it's a lot about mentoring and sort of shaping young lives. And our coaches do that perhaps in more significant ways even than our faculty do. And the stories of what they've done, and Andrew DiDonato as the class of 2010, and his impact on the football program has become actually a national story. It's just so
Hmm.
amazing. He's so Christ-centered. I know coaches can throw around their faith, but then, in the locker room, they're a different person.
Right.
This man is so thoroughly Christ-centered in all that he does, and he preaches the word to these guys. We're going to have 140 plus football players on our team next year. Most of them won't see playing time, but they're there because they so value Coach DiDonato's impact in their lives. So it's a great story in itself. And we have 3 new athletic facilities in play: a new baseball field, a bubble for indoor track, and the harsh winters of
Yeah.
Western Pennsylvania, and also a new field house for football, lacrosse, and tennis on lower campus. So that's another part of our current campaign of $185 million campaign that we have underway, which is going very well.
But do you have pickleball courts?
That's it. I'm glad you asked me that. We put those in last summer. Yes,
That
thank you. That's Brenda and I have become real pickleballers. So we just put those courts in last summer, and I sit in my office and I hear the little tick tock, and I know they're already being used.
Yeah.
that's a cult. My brother or my daughter and I and my dad, we'll be out there in the driveway. Just it's we were doing it, for like 2 hours straight, heat of the day. Put up a tent so we could rotate it and off. And
Wow,
yeah, we love pickleball.
great.
Hey, I think that's a great story of a turnaround from my time at Grove City, where the attitude was, "Oh, we have a football team," to now you're telling me that it's a nationally featured story. So that's tremendous to hear.
Yeah, it's been a great exciting thing. And the way it was done is the key, though. It
Yeah.
was done by changing the culture
Yeah.
at the core, and creating a vision for what it is that we wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
And Coach Donato, it's vision, process, and love, and he sticks with it, and it really works. And so it's been really fun to see.
Yes. Wow. Well, back in 2021, the college was accused of being woke.
Mhm.
And, as an alumnus of the college, Sean, I imagine you had the same reaction. I thought there is no way that
Mhm.
Grove City College
Mhm.
has gone woke. It just that just it
Mhm.
seemed absurd to me. But then there was, things get on the interwebs and they become true because
Mhm.
they're on the interwebs.
Hmm.
So could you describe how you led the college in reaffirming these historic commitments to classic Christianity and evangelical principles?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, you made a great point there that what's extremely challenging about leadership for all of us these days is how um, social media affects opinion, shapes opinion,
Hmm.
and it's just amazing how fast something can get um, set up to be seen a certain way, and you can try very hard to try to push back, but it's quite difficult. And so this sort of popped up, and to our board and to me, we knew that we hadn't changed our direction, that we hadn't changed our core convictions, and so what do we need to do about it? And credit goes to the board of trustees. Our board is a strong board; it's a very engaged board, and we responded, I think, wisely by saying, "Okay, we will take time to look into the issues that have been raised, all of the things that popped up and different people through their postings and so forth. We'll take a look at all of that, and we'll come back after we've had a chance to thoroughly review it." And it was led by a credible group of trustees, and we worked through the various issues and came back and issued a report that said, first and foremost, the school has not gone woke, and that we know who we are. We haven't changed, but there are some issues that have come up that we need to think about
Hmm.
and how we can manage those better. And so I identified some things that could be done better. The board supported those. The board was really wonderfully supportive of me, and we instituted some changes, and and it really seemed to address the issue effectively. It was not easy because the faculty, they're very aligned, but they're also sympathetic to their colleagues, and they were concerned about academic freedom and where that
Hmm.
might go. So we had to, manage that process carefully as we communicated internally about what we were doing. And I'm a big believer in uh, managing these things in the most personal way possible. And
Hmm.
we live in an age where it's a lot about headlines, and it's a lot about a shotgun approach. And I think if you're going to um, f- uh, serve Christ in a leadership position, you have to love the people you're with and care for them and think about how you act justly. And so that took some time to work through, and some people are more patient about that than others. But we're in a very good place, and I really again give credit to the board for its support and its wisdom in acting and reassuring the larger world that we knew who we were and where we were going.
Yes, I was very pleased with the way the college handled that. You mentioned academic freedom, so there's a balance there at a school that does have confessional commitments, even if it's not, you have to subscribe to the Westminster Standards. There's still a level of confessional commitments. Would you talk about that? How academic freedom and yet having a grounding in historic evangelical principles?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a regular balance has to be understood, but I think mission matters most, right? So
Mm.
you start with mission. You can't start with academic freedom. If you do that, you're going to be in big trouble. Whatever academic freedom actually means, by the way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So because you should be hiring people that in their freedom, they're actually teaching truth.
Yes.
And so how they teach true truth is flexible and has opportunity for different approaches. But we're not academic freedom. We're not looking at academic freedom as a way of just sort of not being aligned with the mission. So mission is number one. And faculty know that they're expected in a private college like Grove City College. If you're going to work here, you have to be aligned with the mission. If you don't like the mission, there are other institutions that would fit better. And then once you have that as your foundation, well, then you work with people if they get some ideas that make that more difficult, and continue to reinforce that here's alignment is expected, and that's not that difficult once you again are committed to your mission and you know what your mission is. And we are Christ-centered, and we are conservative, and we know that about ourselves. And so you have to embrace that to some extent, right? I mean, we live in a time that's where politics is very complicated. When we say that we're conservative, we're not saying that we are Republican, and there's only one way that you can think about issues. We mean conservative in the sense of all the traditional values of the West that have been a great inheritance for us, and we want to make sure that we embrace those truths that have stood the test of time.
Conserving our heritage, as it were.
Exactly.
Well, what other events during your tenure as president have been challenging, and how has the Reformed faith helped you to navigate those particular challenges? And keeping Freedom's College open during COVID, where you're having dictates coming down from Harrisburg, I'm sure was a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to think about. How does the Reformed faith impact the way we might lead organizations? And I think about Proverbs 16:9, where the wise man says that in his mind, man makes his plans, but the Lord establishes his steps. I think that's a very Reformed way to look at it, because we have this confidence that God is sovereign over all the affairs and bringing to pass his plans. And that includes our souls and where they're going. So we don't panic if a student is asking hard questions and doubting, because we know that God is sovereignly at work in that heart, and he will choose whether or not he brings that person to faith in his time. And our job is to be faithful in our witness and trust him in that work. And that's true then for the institution as a whole. And so during COVID, the sense was that we're not going to be motivated or directed by fear. We're not going to just automatically follow the zeitgeist of every idea that is, been in sort of established for the new day or whatever. But we're going to try to think about this very carefully, and we're going to have some courage to say we're going to be open. And so we were one of the first schools in the country back in May of 2020, when everything was shut down, to say in the fall we will be open. And families were thankful for that, to know that this very difficult period, at least Grove City is going to try to get back to some version of normalcy.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I had to be wise too, right? And the board had to be wise. We had to make sure we didn't know what this disease was all about. And so there were those. I mean, I took more heat on that from parents than anything I've experienced. And those that didn't want any masks, and those that wanted more controls and more limitations. And on
Right.
both sides, I was getting daily emails. And so I try to respond patiently, and I just I saw how helpful it was to trust God's care and His providential rule over the affairs of our lives, and let's make the best decision we can, and not be afraid to move forward. I remember early in my career when I was dealing with 9/11 attacks or
Mm.
other things, that this same principle was at work. And that going back to Grove City in my freshman year, that once I learned what it was to have a reformed Christian worldview and understand that God is sovereign over all the affairs and that He's bringing this to pass for His glory and for our good, it always gave me a peace in the midst of some of the most trying circumstances. And I think we experienced that peace here in our community while we were trying to get through that. Those, when you ask for the hardest things, that was a big hard thing. The other hard things are when just students suffer personal tragedies.
Oh yeah.
I think I was trying to calculate the other day. I think probably at least 50 parents have died in my time here.
Hmm.
Um, I just ache for those students when I know that they're suffering that way. My own daughter was a student here when my son died, and I experienced what it was for a daughter to be right before her finals in her junior year. Her brother passes away from cancer, and
Mm.
he was 26 years old, right? And so she had to come back and take finals. So I've always had a special place in my heart for students who are suffering like that when they're here, and that's its own sort of you as pastors, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, you talk about difficulties, but yet you've had a very long tenure, especially as presidential tenures are measured. Why? How have you how Grove City typically has long tenured presidents?
yeah.
What is it about the culture of the college that does that?
Well, Weir Kettler went from 1916 to 1956, so he really helped our batting average. I'm only number 9, and Brad Lingo starts next July at number 10. But we have to thank Weir that he took care of 40 years of it. But
Wow.
I think back to earlier you mentioned about it being a great job. When you get into this job, you realize that it's such
Yeah.
a blessing. It's such a beautiful campus for people who are listening to this, and if they've never seen Grove City College, all I can say is if you're ever on Interstate 79 or 80 and you're just kind of passing through, pull off and
You've
look
got
at
to
it.
come visit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a stunning campus. And so, the beauty of it, the distinctiveness of the culture, the wonderful students, it's an easy job to hang on to. I took this job when I was in my later 50s as leaving a law firm life, and I knew this would be my last big thing. So for me, the 11 years is just that I timed it so that I was going to be coming close to sort of more retirement age at this point. But it is a demanding work, and I think you have to be all in with all of your energies. And we have 3 daughters who are married, each have 2 children. One of them has a 3rd child on the way. That daughter lives in Northern Ireland, a daughter in Charleston, a daughter in New York City. So to see our grandchildren, we have to be flexible and be on the road a bit. And we recognize that we had a bit of a window in life when we had an opportunity to be more involved again, back in terms of the faith and spiritual formation in their lives. And that was a privilege that we wanted to take advantage of. So, I think if you go much longer than a dozen years in this work, you're really a champion of energy and commitment, because it's a pretty demanding daily life.
Yes, certainly. Well, as we kind of bring it into a close, what are 3 questions that parents of high school juniors as they go on the campus tours, whether they're going to Grove City or if these questions would lead them to Grove City? What are 3 questions that they should ask on every campus tour?
Well, I think first of all, they want to know about the the academic rigor and that thing we talked about in terms of the type of education. Is this something that is um, uh, holistic and designed to shape, mind, heart, and hand in the way in which someone will live their lives? I think you have to think big about God's calling, and then I think you can see what schools are able to live up to that big sense of calling. And there's schools are really good at platitudes, saying great things about learning,
Mhm.
and it's amazing that all the magazines and all the terminology, although it's very similar terminology.
Mm.
But the question is, what's behind that? And are are um, are there great expectations and hopes for what will be transformational, not just transactional, in the educational experience? And so I think parents, students start with that question of how will this really impact me? How will this really shape me, as opposed to just getting a degree? Will this set me up for um, understanding my calling in the truest sense? I think
Mhm.
secondly, there's the question of fit into the community. So families want to ask, what's the culture like here? What will be my daily experience? One of my great joys is watching the students eat their meals in the cafes, because Grove City students don't sit by themselves looking at their phones. They actually sit and talk to each other. They make appointments to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with each other. It's a bustling environment of real fellowship and conversation, and that's a picture of community. It's a safe community. They save their wallet. They save their tables in the cafe with their wallets.
They still do that. Yes.
They
Yeah.
still do that. In
Wow.
11 years as president, no one has ever stolen a wallet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I've got 2 months to go, but I'm really hoping I can finish this streak.
And they leave
Um,
their laptops at the library and then go to Hicks for dinner, I
exactly.
assume. Does
And
that
when
still
I,
happen?
and once or twice a year, someone will say, "Someone stole my laptop," and it's invariably they left it in their room and they forgot
Uh-huh.
about that.
Uh-huh.
So it's a safe environment. It's a kind environment. People actually say hi to each other on the sidewalks, and they're just it's a pleasant place with, in the sense of that appreciation for each other. There's a pursuit of excellence too. I mean, people engage. I love watching the orchestra and the fact that different majors will be playing for 4 years. What does that say? It says, I get that I've been gifted and I want to be a part of a community and I want to contribute my gifts to the community. You bring that into the church, the local church, when you graduate, you're the one that's going to be there to organize the supper and to organize, the program for people, because you engage. So I think looking at the culture is very important. And then I think finally, you say in order, there's sort of 3 questions. Um, it's about spiritual growth too. I mean, I think families that are coming here need to know at the heart spiritual formation and what will occur. And I think that um, they know that there's programs in place that are designed to get students more into the Word, more into worship, more into fellowship, more into service. And you'd have to be pretty stubborn to not get drawn into that, since it's just so pervasive. So, I'm hoping that we have actually good timing here, because on Saturday we have our admitted student day, which is students who have been admitted, they're deciding whether they're going to come. And you just gave me an opportunity to give my opening speech. So that's kind of the story of, getting to see it.
Well,
Hmm.
great. So, and if I remember correctly, next year will be your 40th year as a ruling elder in the PCA.
Well, yeah, if you're going to give me credit for 11 years of being sort of um, on the sidelines, I'll take
It's a
it.
perpetual office,
A
yes.
perpetual office, I know that exactly.
I'm sure David Coffin mentioned that
He
in
mentioned
at
that
some
1 or
point.
2 times. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And,
As you asked for a sabbatical, I imagine he may have brought that up.
so
So,
right,
how do
right.
you assess the PCA at this time? What encourages you? What excites you? What concerns
Mm,
you about the Presbyterian
mm.
Church in America?
Well, to be fair, I have been a little disconnected from all of the nitty-gritty of the PCA as I've been doing this and just been a member of a PCA congregation. But here's something that I'm excited about. I think that the culture has kind of come back to the PCA in that our distinctives, if you'd asked at the start of the 21st century, are our distinctives going to be a real problem for the growth in the years to come? You might have said, yeah. I mean, take complementarianism. I mean, how's that going to look in 2025?
Mm-hmm.
And yet it feels like the culture has come back to the PCA because I think people understand we want authenticity. We want something that is rich and even if we might disagree biblically, we want sort of that biblical integrity to have the courage to say, well, these are the convictions we have, and we're not just shifting them, sort of to fit the cultural winds. But no, these are the things we stand by. There is a sense in which that's actually, I think, more appealing to people. And so I think the PCA is well positioned. I think it's already enjoying some of the benefit of that. And I know Brent and I are looking forward to when we move to Charleston. There's a church in downtown called Redeemer. We've already been regularly visiting. Our daughter and son-in-law are members there. And I'm looking forward to being able to have more time in the local church to participate and serve and get back into some of the things that were part of our experience back in New Hope Presbyterian Church in Northern Virginia and McLean Presbyterian Church.
Well, President Paul McNulty and Teaching Elder Sean Morris, thank you both for joining. Dr. McNulty, thank you for letting us be part of this retrospective on your time as in ministry there at Grove City College.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to talk to both of you, alums, and your kind words about the college is just so special and greatly appreciated. So I'm thankful for that. We've had this conversation.
Thanks for joining the conversation on the Westminster Standard, which is the podcast of Jude 3. For more information or to support our work at promoting confessional renewal within the Presbyterian Church in America, please visit our website, jude3pca.org. Join us again next time. I'll talk to you then.